I walked into that courtroom and my daughter said loudly, "Finally, the old woman admits defeat." Those words cut deeper than any knife ever could. I stood there trembling, wondering how the child I had raised could speak to me with such cruelty in front of strangers. Today, I'm going to tell you something I never thought I would share. And if for even a second this feels familiar, I only ask that you like this video and subscribe. It will help me keep opening my heart. My name is Margaret, and I'm 73 years old. I've lived in the same small apartment in Elmhurst, Queens for 42 years. The walls are thin, the radiator clangs like a ghost in chains, and the smell of my neighbor's cooking always reminds me how alone I really am. Every morning, I wake up at 5:30, not because I want to, but because my body won't let me sleep anymore. The arthritis in my hands makes everything hurt, but I still make my coffee in the same ceramic mug my late husband gave me 30 years ago. The day that changed everything started like any other. I was sitting at my small kitchen table, looking at the stack of bills I could barely afford, when my phone buzzed. It was a text from my daughter, Jessica. "Mom, we need to talk. Court hearing tomorrow. Be there at 9. No explanation, no warning. Just a command, like I was some employee she could summon at will." I stared at that text for 20 minutes, my coffee growing cold in my hands. Court hearing? What court hearing? My heart started racing, and I felt that familiar knot in my stomach that appeared whenever my children needed something from me. Because let's be honest, that's the only time they ever called anymore. You see, I spent 50 years sacrificing everything for my family. Everything. When Jessica was in college, I took on 3 cleaning jobs just to pay her tuition. When my son Michael needed money for his wedding, I sold my mother's jewelry. When they needed a babysitter, I was there. When they needed money, I found it somehow. When they needed someone to blame for their problems, well, I was always available for that too. But sitting in that courtroom the next morning, listening to my own daughter speak about me like I was some burden she finally wanted to get rid of, I realized something that shook me to my core. I had spent so many years trying to buy their love that I had forgotten what real love actually looked like. Let me take you back to show you how we got here, because this story didn't start in that cold courtroom. It started decades ago, when I first learned that being a mother meant disappearing piece by piece until there was nothing left of who you used to be. I was 22 when I married Robert. Young, hopeful, full of dreams about the family we would build together. We moved into this same apartment when it was new, when the walls were bright white and the floors didn't creak with every step. Back then, I thought this was just the beginning. I thought we were building something beautiful. Jessica was born 2 years later, and Michael followed 3 years after that. Those early years were hard, but they were filled with love. Real love. I remember Jessica's first steps, how she fell and looked at me with such trust, knowing I would always be there to catch her. I remember Michael's laugh when I read him bedtime stories, how he would curl up against me and fall asleep with his tiny hand clutching my shirt. When did that change? When did I become the enemy instead of the safe harbor? Robert worked double shifts at the postal service, and I took care of everything else. The house, the children, the bills, the worrying. Always the worrying. When Jessica got sick, I was the one sitting up all night taking her temperature. When Michael struggled in school, I was the one meeting with teachers, hiring tutors we couldn't afford, making sure he had every opportunity to succeed. I never complained. Not once. Because that's what mothers do, right? We sacrifice, we give, we love unconditionally, even when that love isn't returned the same way. But somewhere along the way, my children learned that I would always say yes, always forgive, always give more, even when I had nothing left to give. The first crack in my heart happened when Jessica was 25. She had graduated from college, with my help, and landed a good job at a marketing firm in Manhattan. I was so proud of her. She was everything I had dreamed she would become. Smart, independent, successful. But success, I learned, had taught her to look down on people like me. I'll never forget the day she brought her new boyfriend home for dinner. I had spent hours preparing her favorite meal, cleaned the apartment until it sparkled, bought flowers for the table with money I didn't have. When they walked in, I heard her whisper to him, "Sorry about this place." My mom never really made much of herself. Those words hit me like a physical blow. I stood there in my kitchen, wearing the apron I had made by hand 20 years earlier, and felt smaller than I ever had in my life. But I smiled. I served dinner. I pretended I hadn't heard, because that's what I always did. That became the pattern. Jessica would come around when she needed something, and I would give it to her. Money for a security deposit on a better apartment. Money when she lost her job. Money when she wanted to go on vacation with her friends. Each time she would promise to pay me back, and each time I knew she wouldn't. But I kept giving, because I thought that's how I could keep her in my life. Michael was different, but not better. He was quieter about his resentment, but it was there. simmering under everything he said to me. He treated me like I was fragile, speaking to me in that careful voice people use with elderly relatives they find embarrassing. When he needed something, he would call and start the conversation with, "Mom, I hate to ask, but," and then ask anyway. When he got married to Sarah, I used my entire savings, $12,000 I had been keeping for emergencies, to help pay for their wedding. I wanted them to have something beautiful, something they would remember forever. Sarah barely thanked me. At the reception, I overheard her telling her friends, Michael's mom helped out a little with the costs. A little. $12,000 was a little. That night, I went home to my empty apartment and cried for 3 hours. Not because of the money, I had given that freely, but because I realized that no matter how much I gave, it would never be enough to make them see me as anything more than an obligation. Robert died 5 years ago. Heart attack. One day he was complaining about his back. The next day he was gone. The funeral was small, quiet. Jessica and Michael stood on either side of me at the graveside, but they might as well have been strangers. They were already dividing up his belongings in their minds, already calculating what they could get from his life insurance policy. After the funeral, they both disappeared back to their own lives. I was left alone with my grief, with bills I couldn't pay, with an apartment that felt too big and too empty all at once. That's when the real exploitation began. Jessica started calling every few weeks, always with a crisis. Her car needed repairs. She was behind on her rent. Her credit card bill was too high. Each time I found the money somehow. I skipped meals, turned down the heat, canceled my cable subscription. I even took out a small loan against the apartment, putting my home at risk to help her. Michael was more subtle. He would visit every month or so, bringing Sarah and their daughter Maya. Maya was the only bright spot in those visits. She was 8 years old, with her grandfather's gentle eyes and a smile that reminded me why I had wanted children in the first place. While Michael and Sarah sat in my living room making polite conversation and calculating how long they had to stay to fulfill their obligation, Maya would curl up next to me and ask me to tell her stories about when her daddy was little. But even those visits became painful. Michael and Sarah would exchange looks when they thought I wasn't watching, rolling their eyes at my apartment, at my furniture, at me. One day I heard Sarah say to Michael in the kitchen, "We need to start thinking about what to do with her. She's getting too old to live alone. Too old to live alone." I was 68 and still cleaning houses 3 days a week. I was still paying my own bills, still taking care of myself. But to them, I was already a problem that needed to be solved. The worst part wasn't the money I kept giving them. It wasn't even the disrespect. The worst part was how invisible I had become in their lives. Birthdays passed without phone calls. Holidays came and went without invitations. When I got pneumonia 2 winters ago and spent 4 days in the hospital, neither of them visited. Jessica sent a text. "Sorry you're sick, Mom. Hope you feel better soon." That was it. I started to wonder if this was normal. If this was just what happened when children grew up and started their own lives. Maybe I was expecting too much. Maybe I was being too needy, too demanding. Maybe I deserved to be alone. But deep down, I knew that wasn't true. Because I remembered my own mother, and how much I loved and respected her until the day she died. I remembered calling her twice a week, visiting for dinner, including her in our holiday plans. I remembered feeling lucky to have her wisdom and her love in my life. My children didn't feel lucky to have me. They felt burdened. Last Christmas was the breaking point. I had been planning for weeks, buying gifts I couldn't afford, preparing enough food for an army. Jessica called on Christmas Eve to say she wouldn't be coming. She was going to her boyfriend's family instead. "It's more convenient," she said. "You understand." Michael came for an hour with Sarah and Maya. They sat stiffly in my living room, checking their phones, making excuses about why they had to leave early. Maya was the only one who seemed happy to be there. She hugged me tight when they left and whispered, "I love you, Grandma." But even her love couldn't fill the emptiness they all left behind. That night, I sat alone with the dinner I had prepared for 5 people, looking at the gifts that would go unopened, and something inside me finally broke open. Not broke apart, broke open. Like a shell cracking to let something new emerge. I started paying attention to things I had been ignoring, like the way Jessica only called when she needed money, like the way Michael spoke to me, not with love, but with tolerance, like the way they both treated my home as if it was some temporary stopping place on their way to better things. I found old emails on Michael's laptop when he left it behind after one visit. Emails between him and Jessica, talking about me like I was a piece of furniture they needed to move. "Mom's getting weird," Jessica had written. "Maybe we should look into assisted living places." Michael had responded, "She's still got money in the house. We should wait until that's gone first." They were waiting for my money to run out. They were planning my future without me, making decisions about my life as if I had no say in it, as if I was already dead. I printed those emails. I sat in my kitchen at 2 in the morning, reading them over and over, letting the words burn themselves into my memory. My own children, my own blood, planning to warehouse me somewhere when I was no longer useful to them. That's when I called the lawyer. I didn't have much money left, but I had enough for a consultation. The lawyer, a kind woman named Mrs. Rodriguez, listened to my story with the sort of patient attention I hadn't received from anyone in years. When I finished talking, she was quiet for a long moment. "Mrs. Patterson," she finally said, "you need to protect yourself, legally and emotionally." She helped me understand that I did have options. I could change my will, removing Jessica and Michael as beneficiaries. I could put the apartment in a trust that would protect it from their interference. I could stop giving them money whenever they asked. But more than that, she helped me understand something else. "You don't owe them your entire life," she said. "Being their mother doesn't mean being their victim." Those words stayed with me as I walked home through the Queens streets I had walked for 40 years. I thought about all the ways I had disappeared to make room for their needs, their wants, their plans. I thought about the woman I used to be, before I became just mom, and then just a problem to be solved. I decided to take control of my own life. First, I changed my will. Everything I owned would go to Maya when she turned 25, with instructions that it should be used for her education and her dreams. Jessica and Michael would get nothing. I also created a small fund for myself, money they couldn't touch or manipulate. Then I started saying no. When Jessica called asking for money for a weekend trip to the Hamptons, I said no. When Michael hinted that he needed help with his mortgage payment, I said no. They were both shocked. They couldn't understand this new version of me, the version that put my own needs first. "What's gotten into you, Mom?" Jessica demanded during one particularly heated phone call. "You're being selfish." Selfish. After 50 years of putting their needs before my own, I was being selfish for finally taking care of myself. That's when they decided to take legal action. The court papers arrived on a Tuesday morning in March. My children were petitioning to have me declared mentally incompetent. They claimed I was showing signs of dementia, that I was making irrational financial decisions, that I needed to be placed under their guardianship. They wanted to take control of my money, my home, my life. They wanted to make me their legal dependent, their property. I sat on my couch holding those papers, and for the first time in months, I smiled. Because finally, they had shown me exactly who they really were. Not the children I had raised and loved and sacrificed for, but strangers who saw me as nothing more than an asset to be managed. The war was on. Mrs. Rodriguez filed counter motions, demanding financial records that would show how much money I had given them over the years. We requested psychological evaluations for all of us. We prepared evidence of my mental competency, my ability to live independently, my right to make my own decisions about my own life. But the cruelest part wasn't the legal battle. It was how they treated me during it. Michael stopped bringing Maya to visit. Jessica wouldn't take my calls. They spread stories to other family members, claiming I was losing my mind, claiming I was being manipulated by lawyers who wanted my money. They painted me as a confused old woman who had turned against her own children. The isolation nearly broke me. There were nights when I lay awake wondering if I had made a terrible mistake. Maybe I was wrong to fight for myself. Maybe I should just give them what they wanted and hope they would love me for it. But then I would remember those emails. I would remember Christmas dinner alone. I would remember all the ways they had made me feel small and worthless and expendable. And I would remember who I used to be, before I forgot my own worth. The court hearing was scheduled for a Thursday morning in June. I woke up that day feeling strangely calm. I put on my best dress, navy blue with small flowers, the one Robert had bought me for our anniversary 10 years ago. I did my hair carefully, put on lipstick, looked at myself in the mirror. I looked like a woman who was ready to fight. The courthouse was everything you'd expect. Marble floors, high ceilings, that particular smell of old paper and stale air. Mrs. Rodriguez met me outside the courtroom, carrying a briefcase full of evidence of my competency, my independence, my right to exist on my own terms. "Are you ready?" she asked. I nodded, but my heart was beating so fast I thought it might fly out of my chest. When we walked into that courtroom, Jessica and Michael were already there with their lawyer. They looked confident, sure of themselves. Jessica was wearing an expensive suit I had helped pay for. Michael had gotten a haircut for the occasion. They looked like successful adults who were reluctantly dealing with a difficult parent. I looked like what I was, a 73-year-old woman who had finally decided to stop disappearing. The judge was a middle-aged woman with kind eyes and a no-nonsense manner. She listened as their lawyer outlined their case. I was exhibiting paranoid behavior. I was making irrational financial decisions. I was isolating myself from family members who loved me and wanted to help me. Each word felt like a small betrayal. They were using my strength against me, turning my decision to protect myself into evidence of my weakness. When it was our turn, Mrs. Rodriguez presented our evidence methodically. Bank records showing the thousands of dollars I had given them over the years. Medical records showing my excellent mental and physical health. Testimony from my doctor, my neighbors, my pastor, all confirming that I was completely capable of managing my own affairs. But the moment that changed everything happened when Jessica was on the witness stand. The judge asked her to describe her relationship with me, and Jessica launched into what sounded like a prepared speech about how much she loved me and worried about me. She talked about my recent changes in behavior and how concerned she was about my welfare. Then the judge asked a simple question. When was the last time you had a conversation with your mother that wasn't about money or legal issues? Jessica hesitated. I watched her face change as she realized she couldn't answer, because there hadn't been such a conversation. Not in years. We talk regularly, she finally said. About what? The judge pressed. Another long pause. About family things. Can you give me a specific example of a recent conversation? And that's when Jessica made her fatal mistake. Instead of answering honestly, instead of admitting that our relationship had become purely transactional, she got angry. Your Honor, my mother has become increasingly difficult and unreasonable. She's turned against her own family. She's making crazy accusations and threatening to cut us out of her will for no reason. She's obviously not thinking clearly. The judge raised an eyebrow. Are you primarily concerned about her will? No, of course not. We're concerned about her well-being. But you did mention the will specifically. Jessica's face flushed red. I just meant she's making irrational decisions about her finances. Such as? Such as refusing to help her own children when they need assistance. And there it was. The truth, finally spoken out loud in a courtroom. They weren't concerned about my well-being. They were angry that I had stopped funding their lives. The judge looked at Jessica for a long moment, then at Michael, then at me. Mrs. Patterson, he said, would you like to make a statement? I stood up slowly, my hands shaking just a little. Mrs. Rodriguez had prepared me for this moment, but nothing could have prepared me for how I felt standing there, looking at my children's faces, knowing that this was my chance to tell the truth. Your Honor, I began, my voice stronger than I expected. I have spent 50 years of my life putting my children's needs before my own. I have given them money when I couldn't afford it. I have forgiven them when they hurt me. I have loved them unconditionally, even when that love wasn't returned. Jessica rolled her eyes. Actually rolled her eyes in open court. But loving someone doesn't mean letting them destroy you. It doesn't mean giving up your right to be treated with respect. It doesn't mean disappearing so completely that you become nothing more than a source of money and free labor. I could feel my voice getting stronger, more sure of itself. My children claim to love me, but they have shown me over and over again that they only value what I can give them. When I stopped giving, they decided I must be mentally incompetent. Because in their minds, a mother who doesn't sacrifice everything for her children must be crazy. I looked directly at Jessica and Michael for the first time since entering the courtroom. I am not crazy. I am not incompetent. I am a woman who finally learned that I have value beyond what I can provide for other people. And if that makes me a bad mother in your eyes, then I'll accept that title. Because I would rather be a bad mother who respects herself than a good mother who has forgotten her own worth. The courtroom was completely silent when I sat down. That's when Jessica stood up and said the words that will be burned into my memory forever. Finally, the old woman admits defeat. She said it loudly, dramatically, like she was delivering the final line in a play, like she had won something. But the judge heard it too. Ms. Patterson, the judge said, her voice ice cold, did you just refer to your mother as the old woman? Jessica realized her mistake immediately. I didn't mean, I was just, please sit down. The judge was quiet for several minutes, reading through the documents in front of her. The silence stretched until it felt like something alive and breathing. Finally, she looked up. This court finds no evidence that Mrs. Margaret Patterson is mentally incompetent or unable to manage her own affairs. The petition for guardianship is denied. Jessica gasped. Michael's face went white. Furthermore, the judge continued, this court is concerned about the motivations behind this petition. It appears that the petitioners are more interested in controlling Mrs. Patterson's finances than in protecting her well-being. I felt something shift inside my chest, like a door opening after being locked for years. Mrs. Patterson, the judge said to me, you have the right to live your life as you see fit. You have the right to choose how to spend your money and who to include in your life. These are your decisions to make, and no one can take that away from you. When we left the courthouse that day, Jessica and Michael didn't even look at me. They walked to their car without a word, their lawyer trailing behind them looking embarrassed. Mrs. Rodriguez squeezed my hand. How do you feel? She asked. Free, I said. And I meant it. But freedom, I learned, comes with a price. Within a week, Jessica had blocked my number. Michael told me I was no longer welcome in his home. They poisoned other family members against me, spreading rumors about my mental state and my treatment of them. Cousins I had known for decades stopped calling. Old friends started avoiding me at church. I was free, but I was also more alone than I had ever been, except for Maya. 2 weeks after the court hearing, she showed up at my door. She was crying, carrying a small backpack, and asking if she could stay with me for a while. Daddy says you're sick, she told me through her tears. But you don't seem sick to me. You seem sad. Are you sad because Daddy and Mommy won't let me see you? I held her close and felt my heart breaking and healing at the same time. This child, this innocent little girl, was the only person in my family who still saw me as human. I am sad about that, I told her honestly. But I'm not sick. I'm just learning how to take care of myself. Maya stayed for 3 days before Michael came to get her. He wouldn't come inside, wouldn't speak to me directly. He sent Sarah to the door to collect Maya and bring her home. As Maya was leaving, she pressed something into my hand. It was a drawing she had made while staying with me. 2 figures holding hands under a rainbow with "I love you, Grandma" written in purple crayon. I put that drawing on my refrigerator, and every morning when I make my coffee, I look at it and remember that somewhere in this world, there is still one person who loves me for who I am, not for what I can give them. The months that followed were the hardest and the most liberating of my life. I had to learn how to live for myself after decades of living for other people. I had to figure out what I actually enjoyed doing, what made me happy, what gave my life meaning beyond being useful to others. I started small. I bought plants for my apartment, something Robert had never allowed because he was allergic. I rearranged the furniture to suit my taste instead of his. I started eating meals I enjoyed instead of meals I thought others would appreciate. I joined a book club at the library. I took a watercolor painting class at the community center. I volunteered at a local animal shelter, walking dogs and socializing cats who needed human contact. Slowly, I started to remember who I was before I became invisible. The woman who emerged from those months of solitude was someone I barely recognized. She was stronger than I remembered, funnier, more curious about the world. She had opinions about books and movies and politics. She had preferences about food and music and how to spend her free time. She was me, but she was also someone new, someone who had learned to value herself. I also started therapy with a counselor who specialized in family dynamics and emotional abuse. Dr. Kim helped me understand that what had happened to me had a name: financial and emotional exploitation by family members. She helped me see that my children's behavior wasn't normal family dysfunction, but a pattern of manipulation and control. Abusers often convince their victims that leaving the relationship means losing everything, Dr. Kim explained during one session. But what they don't tell you is that staying means losing yourself. I thought about that a lot, about how I had lost myself so gradually that I hadn't even noticed it happening, how I had become smaller and smaller until I was barely there at all. But I was there now. Present, visible, real. The hardest part wasn't the loneliness. It was learning to trust my own judgment after years of being told I was wrong, demanding, unreasonable. It was learning to believe that I deserved respect and kindness and love that didn't come with conditions attached. 6 months after the court hearing, I got an unexpected visitor. Sarah came to my door on a Tuesday afternoon, looking nervous and uncomfortable. She wouldn't make eye contact at first, just stood in my doorway twisting her wedding ring. "Can I come in?" she finally asked. I almost said no. After everything Michael had put me through, I wasn't sure I wanted his wife in my home. But something about her posture, her nervousness, made me curious. "Of course," I said, stepping aside. We sat in my living room, the same room where she had rolled her eyes at my furniture and whispered about putting me in a home. But the dynamic was different now. I wasn't the desperate mother-in-law begging for scraps of attention. I was a woman in her own space, in control of her own life. "I owe you an apology," Sarah said eventually. I didn't respond. I just waited. I knew what Michael and Jessica were doing was wrong. The way they talked about you, the way they used you for money, the way they treated you like you were already dead. Her voice broke a little on those last words. But I didn't say anything because it was easier to go along with it than to stand up to Michael. And because I was scared that if I defended you, he would cut me off the same way he cut you off. I still didn't say anything. I wanted to hear all of it. "Maya asks about you every day," Sarah continued. "She doesn't understand why she can't see you anymore. She draws pictures of you and leaves them on your chair at the dinner table. Last week, she asked me if you died, and when I said no, she asked why we were acting like you did. That hit me like a physical blow. My sweet granddaughter, thinking I might be dead because my own children had erased me so completely from their lives. I don't know if this matters, Sarah said, but I want you to know that some of us see what really happened, and some of us are ashamed of our part in it. When she left, she gave me her personal cell phone number. If you ever want to see Maya, she said, call me. Michael doesn't have to know. I never called, not because I didn't want to see Maya, but because I had learned something important about myself. I wouldn't sneak around in my own family anymore. I wouldn't accept secret visits and hidden love. If my son wanted to keep me away from my granddaughter, then he would have to live with the consequences of that choice, and so would she. But knowing that Sarah had seen the truth, that she recognized what had been done to me, helped heal something inside me that I didn't even know was broken. A year after the court hearing, I made a decision that surprised even me. I sold the apartment in Queens. It was full of too many memories, too much history that weighed me down. I used the money from the sale to buy a small condo in Astoria, closer to the water, with better light and a view of the Manhattan skyline. The day I moved out of the apartment where I had lived for 42 years, where I had raised my children and cared for my dying husband, I felt something I hadn't expected. Relief. I wasn't running away from my past. I was choosing my future. My new home is smaller, but brighter. I painted the walls in colors I love, soft yellows and blues that remind me of summer days. I bought new furniture that fits my body and my lifestyle instead of trying to accommodate people who were no longer part of my life. I have a small garden on my balcony where I grow herbs and flowers. I have bookshelves full of books I've actually read instead of books that looked impressive to visitors. I have art on my walls, some of it painted by me in the watercolor classes I still take every Thursday. Most importantly, I have peace. The second year was when I truly began to flourish. I made new friends through my volunteer work and my classes. Real friends who invited me to dinner because they enjoyed my company, not because they felt obligated. Friends who called to check on me when I had a cold, who remembered my birthday without being reminded, who valued my opinions and listened to my stories. I discovered I was funny. All those years of being careful not to offend anyone, not to take up too much space, not to be too much of anything, had hidden my sense of humor even from myself. My new friends laughed at my jokes, and their laughter reminded me that I was interesting, that I had something to offer beyond money and free babysitting. I also discovered I was brave. When the animal shelter asked for volunteers to help with a rescue operation that would require working with traumatized animals, I said yes without hesitation. When my book club decided to read challenging, controversial books that might spark difficult discussions, I looked forward to those conversations instead of dreading them. When a man named Frank, a widower from my watercolor class, asked me to dinner, I said yes to that too. Frank is 75, with kind eyes and gentle hands and a laugh that fills up rooms. He lost his wife 3 years ago after 50 years of marriage, and he understands the difference between being alone and being lonely. We take things slow. We're both too old to play games or pretend to be something we're not. Our conversations are honest, sometimes brutal, always real. He tells me about the guilt he feels for being happy after his wife's death. I tell him about the shame I carried for years, believing I deserved to be treated badly because I wasn't worth more. We're healing each other, one conversation at a time. Frank was there when the next curveball came, 3 years after the court battle. I was having dinner at his house when my phone rang. It was a number I didn't recognize, and I almost didn't answer it. But something made me pick up. Grandma? It was Maya. She was 13 now, and her voice was different, deeper, more mature. But I would have known it anywhere. Maya? My heart started racing. Sweetheart, how did you get my number? I found Mom's old phone. She still had your contact in it. Her voice was shaky, like she was crying. Grandma, I need to tell you something important. Frank squeezed my hand as I listened to my granddaughter speak. I heard Daddy and Auntie Jessica talking last night. They were saying things about you. Bad things. But Grandma, I remember you. I remember how you used to make me pancakes and tell me stories and let me help you water your plants. You weren't mean or crazy like they say. You were the nicest person in our whole family. I was crying now, silent tears streaming down my face. I graduate from 8th grade next month, Maya continued. And I know you probably can't come because Daddy would be mad, but I wanted you to know. And I wanted to tell you that I've been saving money from my allowance. When I turn 18, I'm going to come find you. Because you're my grandma, and I love you, and I don't care what anyone says about that. When we hung up, Frank held me while I sobbed. Happy tears, sad tears, proud tears, angry tears, all mixed together until I couldn't tell one from another. My granddaughter remembered me. Despite everything her father had done to poison her against me, despite years of being told I was dangerous and unstable, she remembered the truth of who I was. And she was planning to find her way back to me. That phone call changed something fundamental in how I saw my situation. I wasn't a woman who had lost her family. I was a woman who had been temporarily separated from the people who truly loved her. Maya was out there, growing up, becoming herself, carrying memories of our love like seeds that would someday bloom into a relationship neither her father nor her aunt could control. I started writing letters to her. Letters I knew I couldn't send. Letters that captured all the things I wanted to tell her about life and love and how to value herself. I put them in a box, saving them for the day she would come looking for me, because I knew now that she would. It might take 5 years or 10, but she would come. And when she did, I would be here. Not the broken, desperate woman who had begged for crumbs of affection, but the strong, whole person I had become in her absence. 4 years after the court hearing, the final test came. I was grocery shopping at the Key Food near my old apartment. I still shopped there sometimes because they knew me, and I liked supporting the local business. When I ran into Michael, we saw each other at the same moment, across the produce section, both of us frozen like deer in headlights. For a second, I thought about turning around and walking away. But then I realized I didn't want to run anymore. I pushed my cart toward him slowly, watching his face change as I approached. He looked older, grayer, more tired than I remembered. Success, I realized, hadn't turned out to be as satisfying as he'd hoped. "Mom," he said when I reached him. His voice was careful, neutral. "Hello, Michael." We stood there for a moment, the air thick with 4 years of silence and hurt and stubbornness. "How are you?" he asked finally. "I'm well," I said. And I was. I looked good, healthier than I had in years, well-dressed, confident. I could see him taking inventory of these changes, trying to reconcile this version of me with the desperate, diminished woman he had tried to control. "You look different," he said. "I am different." Another silence. Around us, other shoppers grabbed tomatoes and onions, living their normal lives while we navigated this minefield of unspoken history. "Maya asks about you," he said suddenly. My heart jumped, but I kept my expression steady. "Does she?" "She's 16 now, getting ready to apply to colleges." He paused. "She's a good kid." "I'm sure she is. She comes from good stock, despite everything." He flinched at that. Good. Let him think about what "despite everything" meant. "Look, Mom," he said, his voice dropping lower. "Maybe we could, I don't know, talk sometime, figure out how to move forward." I looked at this man who was my son, who I had loved and sacrificed for and been hurt by in ways I was still processing. I thought about the years of exploitation, the court battle, the complete abandonment. I thought about the letters I had been writing to Maya, the hopes I had been nurturing, the life I had built without them. "Why now, Michael?" I asked quietly. He looked uncomfortable. "What do you mean? Why do you want to talk now? What's changed?" He shifted his weight, looked away. "Things are different now." "How so?" A long pause. "Sarah and I are getting divorced." Ah, there it was. Not a sudden recognition of how badly he had treated me, not guilt or love or a desire to make things right. He was facing his own crisis and wondering if the mother he had discarded might be useful again. "I'm sorry to hear that," I said, and I meant it. Not because I wanted him back in my life, but because divorce is painful and I didn't wish pain on anyone, even him. Maya's having a hard time with it. She could probably use her grandmother right now. And there it was. The manipulation, subtle but unmistakable. Not, "I've missed you," or "I was wrong," or "I want to repair our relationship." Just "Maya could use you," as if I was a resource to be deployed when convenient. I looked at my son, really looked at him, and felt something I hadn't expected. Not anger or hurt or even disappointment, just a kind of sad clarity about who he was and what he was capable of giving. "Michael," I said gently, "I've spent 4 years learning how to live without you and your sister. How to be happy on my own terms, how to value myself, how to build relationships based on mutual respect instead of need and obligation." His face was getting red now, defensive. "So that's it? You're just going to hold a grudge forever?" "I'm not holding a grudge. I'm protecting myself. From your own son? From anyone who sees me as something to be used rather than someone to be loved." He was quiet for a long moment. Around us, the normal sounds of the grocery store continued. Carts rolling, children asking for cereal, the beep of checkout scanners. "You know what, Mom? You've become selfish, cold. This isn't the woman who raised me." And there it was. When manipulation didn't work, he went straight to blame and shame. The same pattern, just in a different setting. "You're right," I said calmly. "I'm not the same woman who raised you. That woman disappeared piece by piece trying to make you happy. This woman has learned that her happiness matters too." I started to push my cart away, then stopped and turned back to him. If Maya wants to see me when she turns 18, she knows how to find me. Until then, I wish you the best, Michael. I really do. As I walked away, I heard him call after me. Don't expect any inheritance when you die. I kept walking, because that threat, which would have terrified the old me, meant nothing to the woman I had become. My will was already written, my affairs in order, my legacy secured for the one person in my family who had never stopped loving me. That night, Frank held me as I cried for the last time about my children. Not bitter tears or angry tears, but the kind of tears that come with letting go of something you've carried too long. Are you okay? He asked. I'm better than okay, I said. I'm free. And I was. The years that followed were the best of my life. I traveled, not to exotic places or expensive resorts, but to small towns and national parks, and places I had always wanted to see but never had the time or money for when I was funding everyone else's dreams. I took a photography class and discovered I had an eye for capturing moments of unexpected beauty. I learned to use a computer and created a blog where I shared my photos and stories about aging and independence and learning to value yourself at any stage of life. To my surprise, the blog took off. Other older adults, especially women, found my story and shared their own. I received hundreds of emails from people who felt trapped in relationships where they were more valued for what they could provide than for who they were. I started speaking at senior centers and community groups, sharing my experience and encouraging others to trust their own worth. It wasn't the life I had planned, but it was the life I had chosen, and that made all the difference. Frank and I got married 2 years later in a small ceremony at the community center where we had met in watercolor class. My friends from the book club and the animal shelter were there. Sarah came, without Michael, and cried during the vows. Even Dr. Kim attended, smiling proudly at how far I had traveled from the broken woman who had first walked into her office. Jessica and Michael were not invited. I sent them a simple announcement after the fact, not because I wanted to hurt them, but because I wanted them to know I had moved on with my life. Neither of them responded. On my 78th birthday, the doorbell rang while Frank and I were having our morning coffee. When I opened the door, Maya was standing there. She was 18 now, tall and beautiful, and so much like the little girl I remembered, but also completely her own person. She was holding a small suitcase and wearing a nervous smile. Hi, Grandma, she said. I graduated last week. I have 3 months before college starts, and I was wondering, could I maybe spend them with you? I pulled her into my arms and held her the way I had wanted to hold her for 7 years. She was real, solid, warm. She was here. Of course, I whispered into her hair. Of course you can stay. Those 3 months were magic. Maya helped me in the garden, learned to paint watercolors with Frank, came to my book club meetings, and charmed everyone with her intelligence and curiosity. She asked questions about my life, really listened to my answers, treated me like a person with valuable experiences and insights to share. But more than that, she helped me understand what real family love looks like. She didn't need anything from me except my company. She didn't want money or free labor or someone to solve her problems. She just wanted to spend time with me, to learn from me, to be part of my life. One evening, as we sat on my balcony watching the sunset over the East River, she asked me the question I had been expecting. Grandma, why did Daddy and Aunt Jessica stop talking to you? I had been thinking about this conversation for years, planning what I would say, how much truth an 18-year-old could handle about her father's behavior. In the end, I decided on complete honesty. I told her about the years of exploitation, about the court battle, about the way I had been erased from their lives when I stopped being useful. I showed her the printed emails I had saved, the legal documents, the evidence of how I had been treated. Maya listened without interrupting, her face changing as she absorbed the reality of what her father and aunt had done. When I finished, she was quiet for a long time. That's why you seemed so sad when I was little, she finally said. I always wondered why you looked like you were going to cry even when you were smiling. I nodded. I was disappearing, and I didn't know how to stop it. But you did stop it, she said firmly. You saved yourself. Those words, coming from this young woman I loved so much, felt like the final piece of healing I had needed. Maya went to college in the fall, Columbia, with a full scholarship she had earned through her own hard work and intelligence. But she stayed in touch, visiting for holidays, calling just to talk, including me in her life in ways my own children never had. When she brought her first serious boyfriend home to meet Frank and me, I understood what it felt like to be valued as a matriarch instead of tolerated as an obligation. When she asked me to help her plan her wedding 5 years later, I understood what it felt like to be trusted with something precious instead of expected to fund something I wasn't welcome to enjoy. When she and her husband bought their first house and asked me to help them choose paint colors, I understood what it felt like to be respected for my experience instead of dismissed as irrelevant. Through Maya, I learned that the problem had never been with me. The problem had been with people who didn't know how to love without taking, how to receive without exploiting, how to be grateful without being honest about their gratitude. Maya knew how to love properly because someone, maybe her mother, maybe her teachers, maybe just her own good heart, had taught her that love is about addition, not subtraction, about building people up, not wearing them down. Frank died peacefully in his sleep when I was 84. We had 8 wonderful years together. Years that taught me what it meant to be cherished by someone who had nothing to gain from loving me except the joy of my company. At his funeral, Maya held my hand and whispered, "He made you so happy, Grandma. I'm glad you found each other." Even in grief, I felt grateful. Grateful that I had lived long enough to experience real love. Grateful that I had been brave enough to claim it when it was offered. Jessica and Michael did not attend Frank's funeral, though I had sent them announcements of his death. I didn't expect them to come, and their absence didn't hurt the way it might have years before. Maya was there, and my chosen family of friends. And that was enough. More than enough. Now I'm 86, and I'm writing this story as my legacy. Not because I want sympathy or vindication or even understanding from the people who hurt me, but because I want other people in similar situations to know that it's never too late to save yourself. It's never too late to stop accepting crumbs and start demanding the full meal. It's never too late to walk away from people who make you smaller and toward people who help you grow. It's never too late to choose yourself. The apartment I live in now is filled with light and laughter and people who see me as I really am. Maya visits with her children, my great-grandchildren, who know me as the fun great-grandma who lets them paint in the kitchen and tells them stories about the old days in New York. They will never know me as the disappeared woman I used to be, because I refuse to disappear again for anyone. I still volunteer at the animal shelter. I still paint watercolors and write my blog and speak to groups about finding your worth after 60. I still learn new things, experience new joys, make new friends. I am not the same woman who walked into that courtroom 13 years ago, broken and desperate and convinced she deserved whatever scraps of love she could get. I am not even the same woman who walked out of that courtroom, victorious but still wounded, still carrying the weight of other people's opinions about my value. I am a woman who learned slowly and painfully and completely that my worth was never dependent on what I could give other people. My worth was always there, inherent, unshakable, waiting for me to recognize it and claim it. I'm telling you this story because maybe you're where I was 13 years ago. Maybe you're funding someone else's life while your own dreams collect dust. Maybe you're accepting treatment you would never tolerate from a stranger because it's coming from someone who shares your blood or your history. Maybe you're disappearing piece by piece and wondering why no one seems to notice or care. I'm here to tell you that someone does notice. I notice. And more importantly, you can notice too. You can choose to stop disappearing. You can choose to value yourself even when others don't. You can choose to walk away from relationships that diminish you and toward relationships that celebrate you. It won't be easy. It will probably be the hardest thing you've ever done. You might lose people you thought you couldn't live without, but you'll gain something more precious, yourself. And that self, the one who has been buried under years of other people's needs and expectations and demands, is worth fighting for. I promise you that. But I also want to tell you about the ripple effects of choosing yourself, because those matter too. When you stop disappearing, you create space for authentic relationships to flourish. You become a model for others who are struggling with the same patterns. You teach the people in your life, especially the young ones, what healthy boundaries look like. Maya often tells me that watching me transform taught her lessons about self-respect that no classroom ever could. She learned that love doesn't require self-erasure, that generosity doesn't mean accepting abuse, that being kind doesn't mean being a pushover. When her friends come to visit, they're always surprised by our relationship. They expect the typical grandmother-granddaughter dynamic, polite but distant, based on obligation rather than genuine affection. Instead, they see two women who genuinely enjoy each other's company, who laugh together, who treat each other as equals despite the decades between us. "Your grandma is so cool," her friend Stephanie told Maya during one visit. "I wish my grandmother and I could talk like you two do." That comment stayed with me because it highlighted something I hadn't fully realized. By choosing to be authentic, I had become someone worth knowing. The woman who had tried to buy love through endless sacrifice had been boring, predictable, forgettable. But the woman who learned to value herself had become interesting, complex, worthy of real friendship. I think about the other elderly women I meet at community centers and senior groups, women who are still trapped in the same patterns I escaped. They complain about their adult children who take advantage of them, their grandchildren who only visit when they need something, their isolation and disappointment. But when I suggest that they might have some power to change these dynamics, they resist. But they're my children, they say. Family is family. I understand that resistance. I lived it for decades. The fear that if you stop giving everything, you'll be left with nothing. The belief that your value as a mother, as a grandmother, as a person, is entirely dependent on your usefulness to others. But I've learned something these women haven't yet discovered. You don't lose the people who truly love you when you start respecting yourself. You only lose the people who were using you. And sometimes losing the people who are using you creates space for the people who genuinely care about you to step forward. Sarah's relationship with me changed completely after I stopped trying to please Michael. When she no longer had to worry about conflicting loyalties, when she could interact with me without fear of her husband's disapproval, she revealed herself to be a thoughtful, caring person who had always respected me, but hadn't felt free to show it. She started calling me occasionally, just to chat. Not about Michael, or their marriage or family drama, but about books she was reading, places she wanted to travel, thoughts she was having about life. Real conversations between two women who had finally been freed from the artificial roles they'd been forced to play. When she and Michael divorced, she made a point of staying in touch. Not because she wanted something from me, but because she valued our friendship. At Maya's wedding, we sat together and cried happy tears. Two women who had survived difficult men and learned to value themselves in the process. I also discovered that choosing yourself doesn't make you selfish or cold. Despite what people might say, it makes you more generous, not less. When you're not constantly drained by relationships that take without giving, when you're not exhausted from trying to earn love through endless sacrifice, you have more energy and enthusiasm for genuine connection. My friendships now are deeper and more satisfying than any relationship I had during my years as a professional martyr. Frank and I were able to love each other freely because neither of us was trying to prove our worth through self-denial. My friends from book club and watercolor painting see me as a whole person, someone whose opinions and experiences matter, someone worth spending time with for my own sake. Even my volunteer work at the animal shelter is more meaningful now. I'm there because I choose to be, because I enjoy helping animals in need, not because I'm trying to prove I'm a good person or earn someone's approval. The animals don't care about my past mistakes or my family drama. They just appreciate the love and attention I give them, and that pure, uncomplicated affection is healing in its own way. I've also learned that choosing yourself creates unexpected opportunities. My blog about aging and self-worth led to speaking engagements, which led to consulting work with senior centers, which led to a small book deal. At 86, I found myself with a career I never could have imagined, talking to audiences about topics that mattered deeply to me. The book is called Never Too Late, a guide to finding yourself after 60, and it's filled with stories from the hundreds of people who wrote to me after reading my blog. Stories of women who left abusive marriages after 30 years, men who finally pursued their artistic dreams after decades of working jobs they hated, grandparents who learned to set boundaries with manipulative adult children. The response to the book has been overwhelming. I receive letters every week from people who say my story gave them permission to value themselves, to stop accepting treatment they didn't deserve, to prioritize their own well-being for the first time in their lives. One letter, from a 70-year-old woman named Dorothy in Ohio, particularly moved me. Dear Margaret, she wrote, I was about to sign over power of attorney to my son, who promised to take care of everything for me. After reading your book, I realized he wasn't trying to take care of me. He was trying to take control of me. Like you, I discovered that saying no to exploitation doesn't make you selfish. It makes you sane. Thank you for showing me it's never too late to choose yourself. Letters like Dorothy's remind me why sharing my story was worth the discomfort of exposing such private pain. If my experience can help even one person avoid the years I spent disappearing, then the humiliation and heartbreak were not in vain. Maya graduated from law school last year and is now working at a firm that specializes in elder law. She often tells me that my story inspired her career choice, that she wants to help other elderly people protect themselves from financial abuse and exploitation by family members. You taught me that growing old doesn't mean becoming powerless, she said during her graduation celebration, and I want to make sure other grandparents know that too. Watching Maya build her career around protecting vulnerable elderly people makes me proud in ways I never could have imagined. This young woman, who could have been turned against me completely if the manipulation had been successful, instead became an advocate for people like me. She often brings cases to my attention, asking for my insights about the family dynamics at play. I've become an unofficial consultant on her more complex cases, helping her understand the psychological patterns that allow financial exploitation to take root in families. It's ironic in a way. The children who tried to control my finances by claiming I was incompetent inadvertently launched me into a second career helping other elderly people maintain their financial independence. Their attempt to silence me ended up amplifying my voice in ways they never could have predicted. I sometimes wonder what Jessica and Michael think about my unexpected public profile. The woman they tried to portray as confused and incompetent has published a book, speaks at conferences, and consults with legal professionals. The woman they tried to hide away has become more visible than ever. I know they know about the book because Maya told me she saw Michael reading it at a coffee shop near his office. She didn't approach him. Respecting my boundaries means respecting theirs, too. But she watched him for a few minutes as he read. He looked sad, Grandma, she told me later. Not angry, just sad. I felt a complicated mix of emotions when she told me that. Not satisfaction or vindication, but a kind of melancholy recognition of what we had all lost. Michael had lost a mother who might have been a valuable part of his life, if he had been able to see her as more than a resource. Jessica had lost the same thing, and I had lost the children I thought I was raising, the people I hoped they would become. But I've learned that mourning what might have been doesn't mean you should accept what is if what is hurts you. You can feel sad about lost potential while still protecting yourself from people who refuse to see your worth. I think about this often when I speak to groups of older adults about family relationships. Many of them struggle with similar feelings. They love their adult children despite being hurt by them. They want to maintain family connections even when those connections are toxic. I always tell them the same thing. Love doesn't require you to accept abuse. You can love someone and still protect yourself from their harmful behavior. You can wish someone well while keeping them at a safe distance from your heart and your resources. This is perhaps the hardest lesson for parents to learn because we're raised to believe that unconditional love means accepting all conditions, no matter how damaging. But unconditional love doesn't mean unconditional access. It doesn't mean unconditional financial support. It doesn't mean unconditional tolerance for disrespect. You can love someone unconditionally while conditionally allowing them into your life based on how they treat you. Maya and I have talked about this concept many times as she's navigated her own relationships. She's learned to set boundaries with friends who take advantage of her kind nature, to walk away from romantic relationships that don't serve her growth, to prioritize her own well-being even when others try to guilt her into self-sacrifice. You taught me that no is a complete sentence, she told me recently, and that I don't have to justify taking care of myself. These conversations with Maya have shown me another unexpected gift of choosing myself. I became someone who could teach others to value themselves too. The grandmother who constantly sacrificed her own needs would have taught Maya that women should disappear for others. The grandmother who learned to respect herself taught Maya that she deserved respect too. This intergenerational impact of self-respect is something I write about often in my blog and discuss in my speaking engagements. When you model healthy boundaries, you give the people who love you permission to have healthy boundaries too. When you demonstrate self-worth, you show others that they are worthy of the same treatment. Maya's children, my great-grandchildren Emma and James, are growing up with a completely different understanding of what grandparents should be like. They see me as someone with interests and opinions and agency, not just someone who exists to serve their needs. When they visit, we have real conversations about their interests and mine. They help me in the garden not because I need help, but because we enjoy doing it together. Emma, who is 8 now, often tells people that her great-grandmother is famous for writing books about being strong. She doesn't know the details of my story, but she knows I'm someone who teaches other people to believe in themselves. James, who is 6, likes to paint with me in my studio, the spare bedroom where I keep my art supplies and writing desk. He makes abstract watercolor paintings while I work on my next book, both of us creating something that matters to us. These simple moments with my great-grandchildren represent everything I was fighting for when I chose to save myself. Not dramatic victories or public vindication, but the quiet joy of being seen and valued for who I am, not what I can provide. The book I'm working on now is about the specific challenges of rebuilding your life after 60. It's aimed at people who feel like it's too late to start over, too late to change patterns that have become entrenched over decades. I want to tell them what I wish someone had told me. It's never too late to become the person you were meant to be. It's never too late to prioritize your own happiness. It's never too late to surround yourself with people who see your worth and reflect it back to you. But I also want to be honest about how difficult it is. Starting over at 73 was terrifying. Learning to trust my own judgment after years of being told I was wrong was exhausting. Building new relationships while grieving the loss of old ones was heartbreaking. There were nights when I questioned every decision I had made, when I wondered if I should have just kept giving Jessica and Michael whatever they wanted in exchange for the illusion of family connection. There were moments when the loneliness felt unbearable, when I would have accepted any crumb of attention they offered just to feel less alone. But each time I felt that pull toward my old patterns, I would remember who I had become in the months and years since the court hearing. I would remember the friends who valued my company, the volunteers at the shelter who appreciated my help, the readers who found something meaningful in my words. I would remember that being alone is not the same thing as being lonely, and that being with people who diminish you is lonelier than being by yourself. I would remember Maya's young voice on the phone, calling me from her secret location to tell me she remembered who I really was. I would think about the woman she was becoming, strong and confident and unafraid to take up space in her own life because she had learned from watching me that she deserved to be there. And I would choose myself again, every single time. The most surprising part of this journey has been discovering that choosing yourself doesn't end relationships. It transforms them. The people in my life now love me more authentically because they're responding to who I really am, not to some performance of selflessness I thought I needed to maintain. My relationship with God deepened too, in ways I didn't expect. For years, I had confused being a good Christian woman with being a doormat. I thought sacrifice and self-denial were the highest forms of love. But I learned that God doesn't want us to disappear. He wants us to become fully ourselves, to use our gifts and explore our potential and love from a place of wholeness rather than emptiness. The pastor at my new church. I switched congregations after too many people in my old church bought into Jessica and Michael's version of events, often talks about how we can't give what we don't have. You can't pour from an empty cup, he says. Taking care of yourself isn't selfish. It's necessary. This theology of self-care and boundaries was revolutionary to someone who had spent decades believing that good mothers sacrifice everything for their children. Learning that I could be faithful and self-respecting, loving and boundaried, Christian and assertive, opened up spiritual dimensions I had never explored. I started a prayer group for older women dealing with family conflict, and we meet every Tuesday morning in my living room. We pray for our adult children, yes, but we also pray for the strength to protect ourselves from their harmful behavior. We pray for wisdom to know the difference between love and enabling, between forgiveness and accepting ongoing abuse. These women have become some of my closest friends, united by our shared experience of learning to value ourselves later in life. We call ourselves the Never Too Late group, after my book, and we support each other through the ongoing challenges of maintaining boundaries with manipulative family members. Helen, who is 79, has stopped giving her gambling-addicted son money and used her savings to move into a senior living community where she's made dozens of new friends. Patricia, 81, finally divorced the husband who had been emotionally abusing her for 40 years and discovered a talent for oil painting she never knew she had. These women inspire me daily with their courage and their refusal to accept that advanced age means accepting mistreatment. We've all learned that it's never too late to choose dignity over abuse, self-respect over false peace, authentic connection over manipulative relationships. My health is good for 86, better than it was when I was constantly stressed about money and family drama. My blood pressure is normal now. I sleep well. I have energy for activities I enjoy. Choosing myself wasn't just emotionally healing, it was physically healing too. I see my doctor regularly, have updated my legal documents to reflect my current relationships and values, and have made plans for my eventual care that don't depend on Jessica or Michael. Maya is my power of attorney and healthcare proxy, but only because she wanted those responsibilities and has proven herself trustworthy, not because blood relationships automatically confer those rights. I've prepaid for my funeral and written detailed instructions about what I want and don't want. I won't burden Maya with those decisions, and I won't give Jessica or Michael the opportunity to override my wishes or turn my death into another drama about their feelings and needs. This might sound morbid, but it's actually liberating. I'm not afraid of aging or death because I'm not depending on people who don't value me to make important decisions about my care. I'm not worried about being abandoned in my final years because I've built a support network of people who see me as more than an obligation. Jessica and Michael might show up to my funeral. Probably will, actually. But they'll be attending the service of a woman they chose not to know, mourning a relationship they destroyed through their own actions. The people who knew me well, who loved me for who I was rather than what I could provide, will be there too. And their grief will be genuine. I sometimes imagine what they might think as they listen to Maya deliver my eulogy, as they hear about the life I built after they discarded me, as they learn about the friendships and accomplishments and joy they missed by choosing exploitation over relationship. But those imagined moments of vindication don't motivate me anymore. I don't need them to understand what they lost. I don't need them to regret their choices or apologize for their behavior. I don't need them to validate my worth or acknowledge their mistakes. I know who I am now. I know what I'm worth. I know that I made the right choice when I chose myself. And that knowledge, that deep, unshakable certainty about my own value, is the most precious gift I could ever have given myself. Have you ever felt like you were disappearing to make room for other people's needs? Have you known someone who sacrificed so much of themselves that they forgot who they used to be? Share your story in the comments below. Let's remind each other that we're not alone in this struggle and that it's never too late to choose ourselves. And if this story touched you, please like this video and subscribe to my channel. Every like and subscription helps me reach more people who might need to hear these words. You are worth more than what you can give to others. You deserve love that doesn't come with conditions. You have the right to take up space in your own life. Thank you for listening to my story. Thank you for seeing me. And remember, it's never too late to come home to yourself.